Anna does something cute with tutoring. He said it like I wasn't there. Which in all the ways that matter I wasn't. My name is Anna Mercer. I'm 32 years old. I grew up in Scottsdale, Arizona, in a house with travertine floors and a pool that nobody used because my father said the water bills were punishing. My father, Robert Mercer, spent 25 years building a commercial real estate brokerage called Mercer Land Group. He sold industrial and logistics properties across the Southwest. He was not a famous man. He was a successful one. There's a difference and he understood it better than most. My brother, Christopher, joined the firm at 24. He was 30 now with his own client book and a company truck and a LinkedIn profile with 412 connections and a headshot where he looked exactly like my father at the same age. I was a teacher. And then I was not only a teacher. And then I was something my father had no word for, so he chose the word he had. Cute. Let me tell you about the house I grew up in. There was a framed print in the hallway between the bathroom and the linen closet that said, measured, deliberate, forward. My father had bought it at some conference in Tucson in 2004 and hung it himself with a level and a pencil mark. He pointed it out to people sometimes when they came over. That's how I run everything, he'd say. Measured, deliberate, forward. What he meant was, results you can count. Real estate you can count. Commission checks you can count. A son who closes deals, you can count that. A daughter who stands in front of 24 10-year-olds every morning and teaches them long division. That's harder to quantify. My father did not trust things he could not quantify. I understood this from very early on. I don't think I resented it as a child. It's difficult to resent the water you swim in. You just learn to navigate the current. Here is what I also understood, which took me longer to articulate. The things that are hardest to quantify are often the things doing the most work. The reading teacher whose intervention changes the trajectory of a child's relationship to language. The after-school program that keeps a kid in school long enough to graduate. The classroom where 24 children learn that they are capable of understanding hard things. None of that shows up on a commission statement. None of it closes a quarterly deal. But it compounds. Quietly, invisibly, the way the best things do. I did not say this to my father for 7 years. I didn't need to. I just kept going to room 7 every morning and doing the work and letting it compound. Christopher got a truck when he joined the firm. I got a card that said congratulations on your first year of teaching. With a gift card to Target inside. $40. My mother signed it too in her careful handwriting. I kept the card for 2 years before I threw it out. I kept the $40 longer. Let me tell you about the dinner that didn't happen. When I finished my credential program, my cohort had a small celebration at a Mexican restaurant in Tempe. 8 of us around a table with paper tablecloths and a pitcher of margaritas and that specific exhausted relief of people who have survived something together. My friend Danielle gave a toast. She said, to the people who will matter most to someone this year and they won't even know it yet. I called my parents from the parking lot after. My mother answered. I told her I had finished. She said that was wonderful. She said they were so proud of me. She said she'd tell my father. In the background I could hear the television. I said, I start at Copper Ridge in September. She said, that's great, sweetheart. Then she said, oh, Christopher told us about the Chandler deal today. He thinks it might close by end of quarter. I drove home alone. I made myself dinner. I went to bed. I am not telling you this to ask for sympathy. I am telling you because it is the texture of the thing. Families like mine do not wound with large gestures. They wound with the 100 small redirections. The turned head, the changed subject, the specific warmth that flows toward one child and around the other. Over time, around becomes a shape you learn to inhabit. You build inside it. You stop waiting for the direction of the warmth to change. You build anyway. That's the only sane response. I want to be clear about something before I go further. I love teaching. This is not a story about a woman who always hated the classroom and secretly dreamed of being somewhere else. Room 7 at Copper Ridge Elementary in Tempe was mine in the truest sense I have ever owned anything. 24 students every year. Different faces, same urgency. The particular weight of a child who has decided they cannot do something. Math, reading, anything. And the specific, irreplaceable moment when that decision reverses. I stayed because I wanted to. Full stop. What changed was not my relationship to the classroom. What changed was what I built alongside it. I met Owen Chu in my 3rd year of teaching. He was a software engineer at a logistics company in Phoenix. Not glamorous, not startup famous, just competent and serious and genuinely good at his job. He had a younger sister named Lily who was in 4th grade and struggling with fractions. Her parents were working 2 jobs between them and couldn't afford a tutor. Owen had tried to help himself and discovered in his own words that I am genuinely terrible at explaining things I find obvious. Someone at his company mentioned I tutored on weekends. He called. I met Lily on a Saturday morning in a Panera in Tempe, over a table covered in fraction worksheets, and within 40 minutes she had a strategy that worked for her specifically. Not the textbook method, not the way the teacher explained it, hers. A way of picturing the denominator that clicked with how her brain organized things. She got a B+ on her next test. Then an A-. Owen texted me, "How did you do that?" I said I asked her how she thinks about numbers and then I worked backwards from there. He was quiet for a day. Then he texted again. "Can we talk about something?" We talked about something. We talked about it for 6 hours at a coffee shop in Tempe that closed around us while we were still there, until the staff started turning chairs upside down on the tables and we took the hint. What Owen had noticed, what he had been thinking about since Lily's B+, was the gap between how children actually process information and how educational content is designed. Most tutoring, he said, starts with the material and moves toward the child. What I'd done with Lily was the opposite. I'd started with Lily. What if a platform did that at scale, he said. What if every kid got the starting point that matched how they think? I looked at him across the sticky coffee shop table. What kind of platform? I said. He pulled a folded piece of paper from his jacket pocket. He'd drawn something. A flow chart, dense and slightly chaotic with arrows going in 4 directions. I've been working on this, he said, for about 8 months. I looked at the flow chart. I said, "You're going to need a teacher." He said, "I know. That's why I called you." We were married 2 years later. We incorporated Groundwork Learning LLC in the same month we got engaged. It was not romantic or symbolic. It was logistical. We needed the entity structure in place before we applied for our first grant. The first grant came through in the spring. $174,960 from the Arizona Department of Education's Innovation in Instruction Fund. It was not life-changing money. It paid for Owen's time to go part-time at his logistics job and for the first version of our platform, an adaptive assessment tool designed to identify a student's cognitive entry point before delivering any content. I stayed in room 7. That was not a sacrifice. That was the research site. Every feature Groundwork built, my students encountered first. Owen would build something on a Thursday. By Monday I knew what worked, what confused them, what created the particular expression children make when a thing almost makes sense but doesn't yet. That expression is everything. It's the 1-inch gap between not knowing and knowing. If you can see it, you can close it. By year 2 we had contracts with 4 school districts in Maricopa County. By year 3, 11 districts across Arizona and New Mexico. By year 4 the platform was serving 18,400 students. The team was 8 people, all of them former teachers or education researchers, because Owen had built that requirement into the hiring philosophy from the beginning. In March of that year, the year my father turned 60, Groundwork Learning was approached by an investment group out of San Francisco called Aldercroft Partners. They specialized in education and workforce technology. They had been watching our district penetration numbers for 18 months. The conversation lasted 4 months. It was careful and thorough on both sides. The term sheet, when it arrived, valued Groundwork Learning at $31 million. I was sitting in room 7 when Owen sent it to me. I was between morning and afternoon sessions. 24 kids at lunch. The classroom quiet for 40 minutes. I read the number on my phone. Then I put my phone face down on my desk and went to the whiteboard and wrote tomorrow's math problem. When Owen called that evening I said, "We should talk to a lawyer before we respond." He said, "I already called one." I said, "Of course you did." He laughed. I laughed. We had a glass of wine and did not call my parents. My father's 60th birthday dinner was my mother's production. He planned it for 3 months. The venue was Harvest and Stone, a restaurant in North Scottsdale that had been open for 2 years and had the kind of reputation that meant reservations required a phone call and a specific name. Private dining room. 14 guests. A curated menu my mother had spent 2 weeks designing with the executive chef. The guest list was 14 people. Family, Me and Owen, Christopher and his girlfriend Becca, my parents' closest friends Dawn and Sheila Carmichael, my father's oldest colleague Ray Ortega and his wife, two couples from their golf club, and one guest I did not know. Her name was Patricia Hale. She was the founding partner of Hale Commercial Properties, one of the largest commercial real estate firms in the Southwest. She had offices in Phoenix, Las Vegas, Tucson, and Albuquerque. She had been in the industry for 31 years. Her company had revenue of approximately $200 million annually. My mother mentioned her twice in the weeks before the dinner. Patricia Hale is coming, she said the first time with the specific inflection she reserved for things she wanted noted. Your father has been trying to cultivate this relationship for 2 years. I said, that's great. My mother said, it's important that everything goes well. I understood what she was not quite saying. The dinner was partly for my father. It was also partly an audition. Patricia Hale was the kind of contact who did not give second chances at a first impression. I told Owen. He said, interesting. I said, don't do anything. He said, I'm not going to do anything. He said it in the way that meant he was already thinking about something. Harvest and Stone had a private dining room with curved walls and low pendant lighting and a long table in pale oak that seated 16. My mother had arranged flowers, white ranunculus, nothing showy, and small printed menus at each place. There were name cards in her handwriting. Owen and I were seated at the far end of the table. Not the foot, the far end. The seat arrangement placed my father at the center of the long side, flanked by my mother on his left and Patricia Hale on his right. Christopher was 2 seats to my father's left, positioned where my father could bring him into conversation naturally. I had the menu card in front of me. I looked at it. For courses, wine pairings. The kind of dinner that means something. Patricia Hale arrived at 7:15. She was 61, compact, in a dark gray blazer and a single piece of jewelry, a watch, plain and expensive. She had the particular quality of someone who had been the most capable person in every room for so long that she no longer felt the need to signal it. She shook my father's hand at the door and said, Robert. Happy birthday. Warmly. Directly. She was introduced around the table. She had a name for everyone and a genuine interest in none of the small talk, which she managed gracefully by steering every exchange toward something substantive within 30 seconds. She reached Owen and me. Patricia, my father said, this is my daughter Anna. He does some tutoring work. And her husband Owen. Patricia looked at us both. She shook Owen's hand first, he had stood, and then mine. She said, what kind of tutoring work? My father was already turning back toward his seat. Adaptive learning platform, I said. Elementary and middle school. Maricopa County mainly and New Mexico. Groundwork learning, Owen said. Quietly. Just the name. Patricia Hale paused. It was a small pause. A half-second adjustment. The kind that means a file has opened somewhere. She said, I'll find you after dinner. Then she moved to her seat. My father had not heard any of it. He was talking to Don Carmichael about a property in Peoria. The dinner was beautiful. My mother had done everything right. The food was exceptional, the pacing was correct, the conversation stayed in that register that feels easy and costs effort. My father was happy. Genuinely, visibly happy. This was his night and he was wearing it well. Christopher held court on his side of the table, talking about a logistics warehouse deal he was close to closing near Goodyear. My father lit up at this the way he always did. The specific warmth of a man watching something he built continue past himself. He asked questions. Real ones. The commission figures, the client's timeline, the competing offers. I ate my first course and listened and said nothing. Owen ate beside me and said almost nothing, which was unusual. Owen is not a quiet person at dinner tables. He was watching the room. At the midpoint of the main course, my father tapped his water glass. He did not give a long speech. He is not a long speech man. He thanked my mother specifically and warmly for what she'd built and sustained and held together. That part was true and full and I believed every word of it. He thanked the room for being there. He mentioned Christopher. He said a few things about 30 years in the industry that were genuinely earned. Then he looked down the table at Owen and me. He smiled. A real smile, not unkind. The kind that means exactly what it looks like and nothing more. Anna, he said, does something cute with tutoring. Very sweet. He moved on immediately, pivoting back toward Christopher. 14 people at the table. 11 of them moved with him, following the conversation toward Christopher's Goodyear deal. 2 of them, Owen and Don Carmichael's wife Sheila, who had been a school principal for 19 years, looked at me. And Patricia Hale set down her fork. The sound was small. A fork on a plate in a quiet room. But it had weight. She looked at Owen. Owen met her eyes. Something passed between them that I didn't fully understand until later. Then she looked at my father. He was already mid-sentence about the Goodyear deal. He hadn't seen. Patricia Hale said clearly across the table, "Robert." He stopped. Everyone stopped. "Who did you just describe?" she said. My father blinked. "Anna." He glanced at me. "My daughter. She runs groundwork learning," Patricia Hale said. She said it the way a person states a fact they are surprised to have to state. The adaptive assessment platform. 18,000 students. Joyce Foundation. She looked at Owen. Was it the Joyce Foundation or Lumina? Joyce, Owen said. And the Arizona Department of Education. Maricopa County and New Mexico, Patricia said. And you're in conversations with Aldercroft. The table was entirely quiet. My father had the expression of a man who has walked into a room and discovered the furniture rearranged. "Patricia," he said carefully, "how do you?" "I tried to get a meeting with them 4 months ago," she said. She looked at my father with a kind of calm precision that was, in its way, its own form of justice. "My VP of Community Investment has been following their district penetration data for a year. We've been looking for an education partner for our workforce development initiative." She paused. "I was told they weren't taking external meetings until after their current funding round closes." She looked at Owen again. "You're closing this month." 10 days, Owen said. Patricia looked at my father. She was not unkind about it. She was simply, completely honest. "Robert," she said, "your daughter runs a $31 million company." The sound the room made was not a gasp. It was quieter than that. It was 14 people recalibrating simultaneously, each at their own speed. My mother at my father's left had gone very still. She had the expression I had seen on her face exactly twice before. Once when Christopher got in a minor car accident at 17 and once when our dog got loose on the highway. The expression of someone absorbing information that requires a full structural revision. Christopher was looking at his plate. Sheila Carmichael was looking at me. She had the same expression Gloria Whitmore had had in another dining room in another story that was not mine. The expression of someone who has spent a career in education and is very used to watching the field be underestimated. She looked almost satisfied. My father looked at me. And I looked back at my father. I did not say anything for a moment. I let the room be what it was. Then I said quietly to the table and to no one in particular, "We're in elementary and middle school mostly. The platform identifies a student's cognitive entry point before presenting content. Every child gets a different door into the same material." I paused. "I've been running the classroom research out of Room 7 at Copper Ridge Elementary for 4 years. My students are the product's first users." Patricia Hale looked at me with the focused attention of someone taking a meeting. "How long have you been at Copper Ridge?" she said. 7 years, I said. "You've been building this for 4 of them," she said. "Since year 3, I said. She nodded slowly. The nod of someone updating a file they thought was complete. Then she looked at my father again. She said not unkindly, "Robert. She's been doing this since before you started trying to get me to this table." My father said nothing. Owen, across from her, was looking at the ranunculus centerpiece. His jaw was doing the thing it does when he is working very hard to keep his expression neutral. I pressed my foot against his under the table. He pressed back. My father excused himself 7 minutes later. He said he needed some air. My mother said she'd join him. They both stepped out through the side door to a small terrace that overlooked the restaurant's garden. They were gone for 11 minutes. I know because Owen counted. Patricia Hale used those 11 minutes to ask Owen 17 questions. Counted those too. They covered the platform architecture, the district procurement cycle, the Aldercroft term sheet structure, our plans for post-funding expansion, and whether we'd considered workforce development applications at the high school level. Owen answered all of them cleanly. I added details where he left room for them, which he did deliberately. He's always done that, created the exact amount of space for me that I need and no more. By the time my father came back inside, Patricia Hale had asked for Owen's card and handed him her direct line. Not her assistant's number. Hers. My father stood at the edge of the room for a moment watching this exchange. He had the look of a man who had gone outside to compose himself and come back to find the room had continued without him. He sat back down. The conversation at the table had moved on. Dawn was telling a story about a golf trip which was doing the work of allowing everything to breathe. My father picked up his wine glass. He didn't drink from it for a while. After dessert was cleared, after the room had loosened back into warmth and the specific ease of a dinner that has reached its final hour, my father came to our end of the table. He pulled up the empty chair to my right, the one that had been set for a 14th guest who'd cancelled, and he sat down. He looked at Owen first. "I owe you an apology," he said. Owen said, "Robert, you don't." "I do," my father said. Simply. He looked at me. "I owe you one too. A bigger one." He paused. He is not a man who apologizes easily, not because he is prideful in a theatrical way but because he is careful. He waits until he means it completely. "I described your work without knowing your work. That was wrong." I held his eyes. There was a long list of things I could have said. I had been keeping that list for years, adding to it without intending to, the way you keep a drawer full of things you might need someday. The birthday dinners I'd sat through while he and Christopher talked commissions. The times he'd asked about my classroom and then looked at his phone before I finished answering. The card with the $40 Target gift card. The word cute. I looked at my father and I thought, he is 60 years old. He built something real with his hands and his name and 32 years of early mornings. He is also a man who assigned value narrowly and missed his daughter in the gap. Both things are true. They will always both be true. I said, "I know you didn't mean it the way it landed." He said, "That doesn't make it better." "No," I said. "It doesn't." I paused. "But I'd rather have the honest version of you than the diplomatic one. So say what you mean from here on out and mean what you say and we'll be okay." He nodded. Once. The same careful, deliberate nod he gives when he has made a decision. Then he said, "Tell me how the platform works." So I told him. I started from the beginning. From Lily's fractions, from the Panera table, from Owen's folded flowchart with the arrows going in 4 directions. I told him about the grant in the first 4 school districts and the day I watched a child named Marcus at Copper Ridge spend 14 minutes staring at a division problem and then suddenly, visibly, understand it. Not because I'd explained it differently but because the platform had given him a different entry point, one that matched the way he already thought about numbers. My father listened. He asked 3 questions. All of them good ones. About the district procurement cycle, about the data privacy protocols for minors, about how we measured outcomes. These were not softball questions. These were the questions of a man who understands business infrastructure and was applying it to something new. At the end he said, "The classroom research. You've been running that from the beginning." "Since year 3, I said. He was quiet for a moment. "You designed the product," he said. It was not a question. "Owen built it," I said. I told him what to build. My father looked at Owen. Owen looked back at him steadily. "She's being modest," Owen said. "She wrote the pedagogical framework. Every feature spec comes from her classroom observations. The platform thinks the way it does because Anna taught it how teachers think." My father absorbed this. Then he said very quietly to no one in particular, "I had no idea." "I know," I said. Patricia Hale found me at the coat check as the dinner was ending. She was brief and direct in the way of someone who respects other people's time. She said, "I'd like to explore whether there's a fit between groundwork and our workforce development initiative. Community college partnerships, specifically. We have a foundation arm that funds adult literacy and numeracy programs across the Southwest. What you're doing with cognitive entry points, that's not age limited." I said, "I'd need to see what you're building before I could tell you if it's a fit." She said, "That's the right answer." She paused. "I'll have my VP reach out to Owen on Monday. But I wanted to say it to you directly." She looked at me with the frank regard of someone who means what they say without decoration. "You should be in every conversation where groundwork is being discussed. Not as a footnote." I said, "I agree." She nodded. She left. Owen appeared at my elbow. I handed him his coat. He said, "What did she say?" I said, "Monday." He said, "Monday." He put on his coat. He looked at me. "You okay?" "I'm thinking," I said. He let me think. We drove home through Scottsdale. The desert at night has a quality that is hard to describe to people who didn't grow up in it. The dark is different there, wider, with a specific quality of space that doesn't exist in cities with more trees. The sky was very clear. The city lights gave way fast. I was thinking about my father's face. The recalibration in it. The 60-year-old man sitting in a chair at the end of a birthday dinner table learning something he should have asked about years ago. I was thinking about the word cute. It's a specific kind of diminishment, that word. It doesn't attack. It doesn't dismiss. It reduces. Takes something full size and makes it smaller, softer, easier to set aside. The people who use it aren't always being cruel. Sometimes they're just using the only vocabulary they have for things they haven't looked at closely. My father had not looked closely. That was the truth of it, stripped of everything else. He had a son who fit the picture he'd built, and a daughter who didn't, and he had put his attention where recognition was easiest. Not malice. Not conspiracy. Just the gravity of familiarity pulling harder than curiosity. I had spent 7 years building something real a few miles from his office without him ever once asking what it was. I had let him not ask, which was its own kind of decision. I don't carry guilt about it. I had my reasons. I didn't need his validation to do the work, and I didn't want to build something in order to prove a point to my father. I built it because it was worth building. Because the children in room 7 deserved a better tool than what existed. Because Owen had a folded flowchart and a question and I had the one answer that mattered. But I will say this. There was a particular feeling sitting in that car on the highway through the dark Scottsdale desert, knowing that Patricia Hale had set down her fork. It was not triumph. It was something quieter. It was the feeling of a thing being seen. Type seen in the comments if someone finally looked at what you built and called it by its real name. I went back to room 7 on Monday morning. 24 students. September light coming through the south-facing windows at the angle that makes the whiteboard hard to read if you're seated in the last 2 rows, which is why I always rotate seating every 3 weeks. A thing I had to figure out myself in year 2 because nobody tells you that. You accumulate the knowledge of a room slowly, the way you accumulate the knowledge of any place you inhabit long enough to understand. The morning block was math. Long division. I had 3 students who were at a wall with it. Not behind in any diagnostic sense, just at a specific conceptual threshold where the procedure and the meaning hadn't yet connected. I knew this because the platform data told me, and I knew it because I watched their faces. I ran the lesson. Adjusted twice. The third adjustment, a visual grouping method one of my students had essentially invented herself, which I promptly documented for Owen, closed the gap for 2 of the 3. The third needed something different. I made a note. We try again Wednesday. At lunch my phone had 3 messages. One from Christopher. It said I didn't know either. I should have asked. I'm sorry. I read it twice. Then I texted back. Thank you. I mean that. I did. One from my mother. It said, Patricia Hale called your father this morning. He was on the phone for 40 minutes. I think he's going to cry about it later and not tell anyone. I love you. That one made me laugh out loud alone in my classroom, which startled my room aide coming back from the copy machine. One from Owen. It said, Patricia's VP just emailed. Meeting next Tuesday. Also, Aldercroft confirmed the close date. 2 weeks. Then a second message. Also I love you. Then a third. Also do you want tacos tonight? I typed back, yes to all 3. 2 weeks later, Groundwork Learning closed its Series A with Aldercroft Partners. The valuation held at $31 million. The press release went to the Phoenix Business Journal and the Arizona Republic and 4 education technology trade publications. Owen wrote it. I edited it. It led with the student outcomes data, not the dollar amount. My father sent a text that said, I saw the announcement. Very proud. Then 30 seconds later a second text, I mean that. I believed him. Not because everything was fixed. It wasn't. There are years of assumptions to unpack. A lifetime of a certain kind of not seeing that doesn't reverse in a single birthday dinner. These things take time. They take continued honesty and the willingness to stay in the same room long enough for the discomfort to become something more useful. But I believe that he meant it. I texted back. Thank you, Dad. Then I'll send you the platform link. Try the demo. It'll take you about 12 minutes. He texted back. I'll do it tonight. That Sunday he called me. He had done the demo. He had spent 43 minutes in it. Not 12 because he went back and retried sections, which is exactly what a careful man does when he's learning something new. He said, the entry point assessment. That's you. I said, that's both of us. He said, but the pedagogical framework. The way it asks the questions before it presents the material. Yes, I said. That's mine. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, I owe you more than I've paid. I said, not money, Dad. He said, no. Not money. We were both quiet for a moment. Outside my window the desert was doing its evening thing. The light going amber, then pink, then the particular blue that comes just before dark in Arizona that exists nowhere else on Earth. I said, come see room 7 sometime. I'll show you what it looks like in an actual classroom. He said, tell me when. I said, next Thursday. We have a math block at 9. Come at 8:45 so you can see the setup before the kids arrive. He said, I'll be there. He stood at the back of room 7 at 8:45 on a Thursday morning and watched 24 10-year-olds work through a long division lesson, 3 of them using the platform's adaptive track on their tablets, the rest on worksheets that I had designed to mirror the platform's methodology without requiring a device. He watched for 40 minutes. He said nothing during the lesson itself, which told me something because Robert Mercer does not stay quiet in rooms where he has nothing to contribute. He was learning. He was taking the room seriously enough to observe it first. When the bell rang for transition, he followed me into the hallway and he said, this is what you've been doing. 7 years, I said. He nodded. The same deliberate nod. Then he said, it's not cute. No, I said. It's not. He put his hand briefly on my shoulder, the same gesture he'd given Christopher after every deal closed, a short, firm, affirming touch. Then he said, I'll be at your next board meeting. If you'll have me. I said, we'll see. He accepted that. That's the right answer from a man who runs his life measured, deliberate, and forward. We'll see is a door that's open. Conditional. Earned going forward. That's enough. The word cute is a small word. 4 letters. 1 syllable. It has a specific gravity, not heavy enough to crush anything, just heavy enough to pin a thing in place, to keep it small, to make the people around it feel comfortable with their own larger assessments. I let my father use it for years. Not because I had to, because I didn't need him to stop. I had room 7. I had Owen. I had 24 children every September who needed something better than what existed, and I was building it. The day Patricia Hale set down her fork, I didn't feel vindicated. Vindication implies you were waiting for something. I wasn't waiting. I was working. What I felt was simpler than that. I felt seen. By the right person at the right table for exactly the right reason. Not because of the number on a term sheet. Because she had done her homework. Because she had followed the district data. Because she knew what the work was before anyone in that room described it. That's the only validation that ever meant anything to me.